November 6, 1817. Claremont House stands silent in the darkness of the English countryside. Inside, candles flicker in a second-floor room. The air is thick with something unspoken, something wrong. 21-year-old Princess Charlotte of Wales lies motionless. Her husband kneels beside her, his hand trembling as it grips hers. In the corner, a physician stares at his own bloodied instruments, his face pale with the realization of what has just occurred. Some historians call it tragedy. Others call it negligence. But what if Princess Charlotte did not die by fate, but by the hands of men who refused to listen? Within hours, the news will spread. Church bells will toll across London. Strangers will weep in the streets. An entire nation will plunge into mourning for a young woman they had never met but desperately loved. The records from that night are meticulous. They documented the time of death, the witnesses present, the exact position of her body, the prayers that were said. But they never recorded the truth. They wrote everything down except what actually killed her. This is the story of Princess Charlotte of Wales, the heir to the British throne, who died under circumstances that were never fully explained and perhaps never meant to be. To understand why Charlotte's death shattered a nation, you first have to understand what she represented. In the early 19th century, Britain was a country in crisis. The king, George III, was declared insane, locked away in Windsor Castle, tormented by voices only he could hear. His son, the Prince Regent, ruled in his place, and the public despised him. George IV was everything the people hated about royalty: extravagant, selfish, cruel to his wife. He spent fortunes on palaces while ordinary people starved. He was mocked in cartoons, booed in the streets, and regarded as a national embarrassment. But his daughter was different. Princess Charlotte was born in 1796, the only legitimate child of the Prince Regent and Princess Caroline of Brunswick. From the moment of her birth, she became the single thread holding together the future of the British monarchy. If she lived, if she married, if she produced an heir, the crown would pass to her bloodline. The disgraced reign of her father would eventually end, and Britain could hope for something better. She wasn't just a princess, she was a promise. The hope of a nation rested on the shoulders of one young woman, and she carried that weight every single day of her short life. But Charlotte was not a symbol, she was a person. Those who knew her described a young woman who was stubborn, intelligent, and intensely alive. She had her father's temper and her mother's defiance. She read voraciously, philosophy, history, novels that were considered scandalous for a young lady. She had opinions, she argued, she questioned authority. In a royal family that valued obedience above all else, Charlotte was a problem. Her childhood was marked by isolation. Her parents despised each other, and their mutual hatred became a weapon used against her. Her father controlled every movement. Her mother was exiled from court, deemed too improper, too wild. Charlotte was caught between them, a pawn in their endless, bitter war. She was not allowed to see her mother without supervision. Her letters were monitored. Her every aspect of her life was controlled by men who saw her not as a daughter, but a dynastic asset. And yet, the public adored her. When she appeared in public, crowds gathered. They cheered for her. They reached out to touch her carriage. In their eyes, she was everything her father was not: genuine, warm, capable of compassion. She represented the future, a future where the monarchy might actually care about its people. Charlotte knew this. She felt the weight of their love and their expectations, and in private letters she expressed the suffocating pressure of it all, the loneliness, the fear that she would never live up to what they needed her to be. But she tried. She always tried. In 1814, at the age of 18, Charlotte did something almost unheard of for a royal woman. She chose her own husband. Against her father's wishes, she fell in love with Prince Leopold of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld. He was kind, intelligent, handsome, and most importantly, he treated her as an equal. Their courtship was genuine. Their letters reveal a tenderness rare in arranged royal marriages. They married in May of 1816. The wedding was modest by royal standards, but the public celebrated as if it were a coronation. Finally, their beloved princess had found happiness. But happiness in the world of royalty is always conditional. The moment Charlotte became a wife, she became something else, a vessel for the future. The British succession depended on her producing an heir. The pressure was immediate and relentless. Courtiers whispered about her body. Physicians examined her. Every month that passed without a pregnancy was scrutinized, analyzed, treated as a potential failure. When she finally conceived in early 1817, the nation exhaled in collective relief. Preparations began immediately. Doctors were consulted. The finest physicians in England were summoned. Plans were made for the birth of the future sovereign. But beneath the celebration, there was something darker. Charlotte was terrified. She had heard the stories. Every woman had. Childbirth was one of the most dangerous events a woman could endure. Even with the best medical care, women died, frequently, horribly. She confided her fears to Leopold. She wrote about them in letters. She knew the risks, and as her pregnancy progressed, those fears only grew. By autumn, she was exhausted. The pregnancy had been difficult. She suffered from weakness, nausea, swelling in her legs. Her physicians assured her this was normal. They told her to rest, to trust them. She had no choice but to obey. November 3rd, 1817. Charlotte's labor begins. It starts in the evening, manageable at first. The contractions are regular. The midwife, Mrs. Griffiths, is calm and experienced. Prince Leopold stays close, pacing the hallways outside her room. But as the hours pass, something becomes clear. This is not going as it should. Sir Richard Croft, the royal physician, is in charge. He is a man of reputation, trusted by the royal family. But he is also a man of his time, a time when childbirth was treated as a medical event to be controlled, not a natural process to be supported. He orders Charlotte to lie still. He forbids her from eating or drinking, believing it will complicate the birth. He dismisses the suggestions of the midwife, a woman who has delivered hundreds of babies and knows instinctively that something is wrong. 50 hours pass. 50 hours of agony. Charlotte is exhausted beyond comprehension. Her body is failing. She begs for help. She asks for forceps, for intervention, for anything that might end the nightmare. Croft refuses. He insists that nature must take its course. He is afraid of being blamed, afraid of using instruments that might injure the child, afraid of the scandal if something goes wrong. So he waits, and Charlotte suffers. Finally, on November 5th, the child is born. A boy, stillborn. The room falls silent. Charlotte, delirious with pain and exhaustion, asks to see him. They show her the tiny, lifeless body. She weeps, not just for the child, but for everything that loss represents. But she is still alive. There is still hope. The physicians reassure Leopold. They tell him she will recover. She is young, strong. This is tragic, but survivable. They are wrong. Hours later, Charlotte begins to hemorrhage. Her pulse weakens. She complains of cold, of pain in her chest. She clutches at the bedsheets, gasping for air. The doctors panic. They try bloodletting, a common practice, but one that only worsens her condition. They apply hot compresses. They give her brandy. Nothing works. At 2:30 in the morning, on November 6th, Princess Charlotte of Wales dies. Prince Leopold is inconsolable. He holds her body and refuses to let go. The physicians stand frozen, unable to process what has just happened. The future of Britain has just died in a second-floor bedroom, and no one can explain why. The official cause of death was recorded as exhaustion and internal hemorrhage following childbirth. But those words explain nothing. In the days following her death, questions began to surface. Whispers turned into accusations. The public wanted answers. Why had the labor lasted so long? Why had Sir Richard Croft refused to intervene? Why had he ignored the midwife's warnings? Why had he denied Charlotte food and water for over 2 days? Sir Richard Croft became the face of the tragedy. He had been Charlotte's physician throughout her pregnancy. He had assured the royal family that everything would be fine. He had made every critical decision in that room. And now she was dead. The guilt consumed him. Friends reported that he could not sleep, could not eat. He obsessively reviewed his notes, searching for the moment where everything went wrong. He replayed every decision in his mind, tormented by the possibility that he had killed the future Queen of England. He began to unravel. In private letters, he questioned his own judgment. He wondered aloud whether he should have used forceps, whether he should have listened to Mrs. Griffiths, whether his fear of scandal had cost Charlotte her life. The royal family, desperate to protect their reputation, publicly defended him, but the whispers continued. 3 months after Charlotte's death, Sir Richard Croft attended the labor of another aristocratic patient. The birth went smoothly. Mother and child survived. But Croft, standing in that room, was overcome with despair. He left the house, walked to his own residence, and took his own life with a pistol. He left no note, but everyone understood why. His death did not answer the questions. If anything, it deepened the mystery. Medical historians have spent 2 centuries trying to reconstruct what happened in that room. Some believe Charlotte suffered from a condition called placental abruption, where the placenta detaches from the uterus, causing catastrophic bleeding. Others suggest she experienced a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot that traveled to her lungs. Both conditions would have been impossible to detect or treat in 1817. But there is another, darker possibility, that Charlotte's death was not inevitable, that with different decisions, different doctors, different respect for the knowledge of the women in that room, she might have survived. The midwife, Mrs. Griffiths, reportedly begged Croft to use forceps hours before the child was born. He refused, believing it was too dangerous, too invasive. But had he acted, both Charlotte and her son might have lived. The tragedy is not just that she died, it's that her death may have been preventable. And the men who made the decisions, save for Croft, destroyed by his own conscience, never faced real consequences. They were protected by their titles, their reputations, their gender. Charlotte, in death as in life, had no control over her own body. The news of Charlotte's death spread across Britain like wildfire. Shops closed, theaters went dark, strangers embraced in the streets, weeping for a woman they would never meet. It was said that even hardened soldiers broke down in tears. The mourning was not performative, it was real, visceral, collective. Charlotte had been more than a princess. She had been a symbol of hope in a time of despair. Her death felt like the death of the future itself. Prince Leopold was shattered. He withdrew from public life, consumed by grief. He would later say that he lost not just a wife, but the only person who had ever truly loved him. The royal family scrambled. With Charlotte gone, the line of succession was in chaos. George III's surviving sons, middle-aged, unmarried, or childless, were suddenly under immense pressure to produce heirs. Within a year, 3 of them married in haste. It was a humiliating spectacle, a scramble for dynastic survival. One of those marriages would eventually produce a daughter, a girl named Victoria, who would become queen and reshape the British Empire. But Victoria's existence was an accident of desperation, a consequence of Charlotte's death. The Britain that mourned Charlotte in 1817 was not the same Britain that would celebrate Victoria decades later. The loss had changed something fundamental. It had revealed the fragility of the monarchy, the vulnerability of power, the unbearable cost of royal duty. Princess Charlotte's story is not just a royal tragedy. It is a story about women's bodies and who controls them. It is a story about medicine and the dangerous arrogance of men who believed they knew better than the women who had been attending births for centuries. It is a story about power and how even a princess, beloved, adored, destined to be queen, could be silenced, dismissed, and ultimately sacrificed. Charlotte never wanted to be a symbol. She wanted to be a person, a wife, a mother. But history did not allow her that choice. Her death exposed the brutal reality of royal life, that women, no matter how high their rank, were seen as vessels, not individuals, that their pain was secondary to the needs of the state, that their voices, even in their final moments, were often ignored. In the years following her death, there were calls for reform in obstetric medicine. Some physicians began to listen to midwives, to respect the traditional knowledge that had been dismissed for so long. But those changes came too late for Charlotte. She became a cautionary tale, a ghost story whispered in the halls of power. And in some ways, she still is, because the questions surrounding her death were never fully answered. The records were sanitized. The truth was buried beneath layers of royal protocol and medical defensiveness. We know when she died. We know where she died. We know who was in the room, but we will never truly know what killed her. On a cold November night in 1817, a young woman died in agony. Her name was Charlotte. She was 21 years old. She was loved by millions. She was the future of a nation, and she was failed by every system that was supposed to protect her. The physicians wrote meticulous notes. They documented every detail, every decision, every moment. They wrote down the time. They wrote down the room. They wrote down the witnesses. But the real cause of her death, the choices, the negligence, the silenced voices of the women who knew better, was something they could never bring themselves to record. Charlotte's grave lies in Windsor, marked with a monument that calls her the hope and the glory of the British Empire. But perhaps the most fitting memorial would be a simple acknowledgement that she deserved better, that she deserved to be heard, that she deserved to live. Her death was recorded, but the truth was buried with her.